Welcome to the Life Well Led podcast, everybody. I'm Eric Kebschull, leadership and executive coach and consultant. I'm riding solo today. My co-host is under the weather, but we still wanted to put out an episode. And today we're going to talk about different questions people have that are very common when it comes to what's the difference in coaching, specifically leadership and executive coaching. So let's start there. Finding the right leadership or executive coach. Maybe even before that, let's start with what is the difference between a leadership and executive coach. And you're going to hear an answer offered today from me, which is going to be very frustrating, but the answer sometimes is it depends. And that sounds very much like a lawyer's answer, but the truth is the difference between an executive coach and a leadership coach depends on whether or not that person defines how they define it, actually. How do they define themselves? If they call themselves a leadership coach, that might be something different from what somebody else who calls themselves a leadership coach is, right? So a leadership coach to me is somebody who works with anybody, regardless of what their title is in the leadership realm. An executive coach is based on title. So executive coach might be strategy oriented. It might be big bird's eye view of the company, whereas a leadership coach might be the development of leadership skills that they may not have had in school, obviously, or on the job training, because this is the on the job training. This is the leadership skills that they don't necessarily have. That's where I see the difference. But that doesn't mean that that's necessarily true for everybody. There's not a really good uniform difference between the two in actuality. In theory, there is, but in reality, it really depends on how they define themselves. Leadership and strategy coach, leadership and executive coach. I differentiate the two because I work with leaders who aren't executives, and I work with entire businesses starting with the executives. But back to the question. What's the difference between the two? How do you figure that out? Do your research. Unfortunately, that's another thing that you're going to have to do when it comes to coaching is do your research. Unlike other professions, there's really no credentials. There is some credentialing. That's what the ICF is for. And the ICF does an okay job of defining what coaching is and isn't and trying to setting a standard between what a, accredited coach offers and what other coaches offer. That doesn't mean that other coaches who aren't accredited aren't offering good services. It just means you have to do your research as a consumer more. It is what it is for now. And that kind of goes into the next question, which is finding the right executive coach. Doing your research means how do you search for what they're offering? Look at who they're talking to in their, if they're on social media, who are they talking to and what messages are they trying to address? Odds are they're trying to touch on low-hanging fruit, but they might be talking about topics that they talk about with their clients. I know when you talk to a coach, it's easier to have some of the things that are easy for people to understand to then get to the higher level stuff that goes along with each individual engagement. But, do they have a program that they go through? Do they have an individual tailored system that they use for each individual that they work with? What is it that they use that helps people get from point A to point B? And sometimes that's on the website. Sometimes that's in what they're saying. Sometimes it's in what they're not saying if you're intuitively listening to what they're trying to say. But sometimes it takes a full conversation with them. So when you try to find the right executive or leadership coach and you're trying to figure out what the difference between the two is, best fit for you is having a conversation with somebody. Obviously, those who have testimonials and reviews makes it as a consumer easier to understand, but it's just like a therapist. Just because they're well rated doesn't mean that they're a good fit for you. Find the right person for you. Have the conversation that you may not have otherwise had to get a good fit for it. Treat it like it is a therapist or treat it like it is somebody that you're going to be dealing with every day because they are. They're somebody you're going to have a lot of conversations with and spend a lot of emotional energy with. So have the conversation, feel comfortable with them. Feel like you have something good going on there. So that way you can feel comfortable making that investment. The second question, are the benefits of executive coaching, comes up quite a bit. When they look for an executive coach or a leadership coach, they ask, well, what are the benefits of it? And they're not just looking at, what's a good fit. They're also asking, what am I going to get out of this? What's my return on investment? Now, I would caution and say that if somebody says, I'm guaranteeing you're going to have increased profits or you're going to have this or that, if they have something tangible that they're offering, keep that with a grain of salt because a coach is not there to necessarily do what a consultant does. And a consultant doesn't have a guarantee that your profits will increase either, but they have a system that may have worked for others in the past. And a coach is supposed to be doing something slightly different, which is helping you figure out what you need to do to solve the problem. So they can give you a system that's worked in the past for others, is essentially what I'm trying to say. The return on investment can be very intangible at first, and it may take longer period of time to measure those tangibles. For some coaches, it's, with a business coach, it might be a little different, but when it comes to an executive or a leadership coach, it's less on metrics. Sometimes it might be if they're measuring on individual quality performances, but it's carrying down from the coach to the leader, and the leader figures out in that conversation, or that executive figures out in that conversation, what they need to do to get the best out of their team. And so the real quality metrics, or the quantifiable metrics, are their team's metrics. How well did their team perform? But a lot of them are going to be intangible. How did they react to situations? How well did they do when they reacted to those situations? What did they feel like when they were doing this? How do they feel about themselves when they were done with that engagement? If they have an assessment, is there something that can track progress with those assessments? Is there things that you can do to track progress with goals? So there are benefits to it. A lot of people think of a coach, they think of somebody who's there to solve problems. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that they're to help you solve your problems. So they're helping you uncover insights and clear blocks in your way in order to move forward. So that would be my advice as far as the benefits of executive coaching go. And a lot of people understand coaching as somebody who's going to hold you accountable. So you're paying somebody essentially to say, did you do this? And give you good motivation and inspiration to actually go through with the goals that you're setting. Again, I think there's more to it, to a coach, than that because they do clear blocks that get in your way mentally and help you identify things that you can actually take control of, as well as what identifies that maybe you can't have control of or you don't have control of. So it's benefits to it, to me, in my opinion, for a leadership and executive coach, for a leader or an executive, are clearer frame of mind, some more clarity, more confidence, better processes. And while they can't guarantee better team performance, because that would be literally guaranteeing that somebody else will do something that you want them to do, there is a better chance of having that message communicated clearly, directly, and with enough empathy, or at the very least, more emotional intelligence to be able to get people to be inspired to act on the challenges that they have at their work every single day. It keeps people organized better. They're not a personal assistant, but it helps them organize their thoughts better with time management, better with stress management. Again, they're kind of like a therapist. They're a sounding board. So that in and of itself is cathartic, right? So all of that to say that an executive coach really is a partner in your, not just your accountability, but helping you find your goals, identify your goals, clear blocks, find insights, and get to the heart of the issue and make progress on those goals. The last question I can think of that would be big is, and this one may be the first one after they consider whether or not they want the coach and they find a good fit. The first question is always, what is it going to cost? Well, unfortunately, folks, it depends. It's another depending situation because there is no real market metric on what a coach charges. Ironically enough, those that have a credential, like an ICF credential, tend to not charge as much as the ones that, and it's more wild. Like you could have somebody who charges very little or somebody who charges an extravagant amount of money. It's just ironic that the ICF coaches are the ones that have some sort of less than that, but it also makes sense because there's a little bit more stability in the conversation because you're in a group of people who can have a conversation, although uncomfortable, about what they should be charging in the marketplace for their services. That obviously depends on demand, it depends on reputation, it depends on market value for it. What I charge and what somebody who's been doing this 20 years and has a great reputation in the business community that they're in might be charging totally different things. So I would say the range is unfortunately a little too large. It can go from, $200 or $300 an hour to $3,000 an hour. You might be spending on a 6-month engagement, 15 grand to 30 grand. It just depends per person, or per group or whatever it might be. I don't like that there's such a large range, but I also kind of understand it as a business owner that you have to charge what you think you're worth and people will pay what you think you're worth. I don't necessarily think I should be judging or casting a decision on what other people should charge. But if they're not posting it, it's a conversation that they can have one-on-one. And that's kind of where this theme is going today, is that if it depends, and it always seems to depend, right? There's no real yes or no answer. Have a conversation with the coach that you want to work with. If you are impressed enough with the flash and glitter of the website, what their conversations are, their genuineness that shows off on social media, or their writing, or when you met them and had that conversation, then maybe it's worth having a conversation one-on-one and see whether or not that conversation goes. If you feel like it's too much of a sales pitch and that throws you off, then don't do it. If you feel like there's a good, genuine connection with that person, then it doesn't hurt to have the conversation of, all right, how are we going to be a good fit? Have conversations where you feel like you have trust, security, safety in the conversation, and ultimately feel like there's good chemistry. And then as far as cost goes, it's got to be within your price range, right? So that is the big questions I can think of when it comes to what to do for an executive or leadership coach when you do your research. And I hope that it's helpful. And ultimately, the goal here on the podcast, if nothing else, is to try to educate more on what coaching is and isn't, as well as give better ideas. And if you're working with a coach, that you feel comfortable working with that coach. See you next time.